Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So this weekend we have a Cruiserweight World title fight between Chris Billam Smith and Richard Riakporhe. This fight goes down in London at Selhurst Park, Crystal Palace. Basically it's in Richard Riakporhe's hometown. He's the challenger, but politically you would certainly say he's the A-side. But regardless, this is a decent cruiserweight fight in my opinion, and I'm expecting a competitive fight in this bout. Chris Billam Smith, of course, both of these guys have trod a similar path. Both guys had good success at domestic level. Both guys became British champion. Both guys had hard fights at domestic level. And of course, back in the day they fought each other. Back in 2019, it was 2019. And that fight was a 10-rounder, which ended up in a split decision in favour of Richard Riakporhe. It was a close fight from what I remember. I felt Riakporhe just about did enough, but it was a close fight. Ever since that first fight, however, Chris Billam Smith's career has progressed more than Richard Riakporhe's. Of course, Riakporhe had 2 years out of a ring, from 2019 to 2021. He then signed to Sky Sports, and since he's been on Sky Sports, his level of competition hasn't been particularly great. You know, he had several hard fights at domestic level prior to Sky Sports against the likes of Jack Massey, Chris Billam Smith, Sam Hyde. You know, he had these hard fights prior to Sky Sports, but since he's been on Sky Sports, he hasn't really had that sort of fight. You know, he's beaten shop-worn guys like Ola Duradola and Krzysztof Glowacki, and he knocked those guys out. But, you know, I think the matchmaking has been flattering, to say the least. I'm not really sure whether Richard Riakporhe has improved in the last few years because he's not really had a hard fight. Having said that, he's not taken any punishment in these fights. Whereas Chris Billam Smith, since that Riakporhe fight, he's come on a long way. You know, he won the British, he won the European titles at Cruiserweight, and he's had some hard fights against the likes of Tommy McCarthy, Isaac Chamberlain, and of course he beat Lawrence Okolie to win that world title, then defended against Matthias Masternak. But all of these were hard fights, you know? These were hard physical fights. And for me, Chris Billam Smith has that type of style that necessarily isn't going to age well. You know, he's already taken a fair bit of punishment in his career. Maybe you could say he relies on his chin, his strength and his toughness a little too much. He's made it work for himself, but at what cost, and when does that fail him? I think this one's interesting because stylistically I can see where both guys have success. I think Richard Riakporhe is a much bigger puncher than Chris Billam Smith. He's also a bigger cruiserweight. Richard Riakporhe is 6'5" with a 77-inch reach, whereas Chris Billam Smith is 6'3" with a 75-inch reach. So Riakporhe is taller and longer, and it kind of plays into his style. He needs distance to really generate power on that straight right hand, which is his primary weapon. That's the punch that causes the damage. That's the punch that gets knockouts, even to the body, as we saw against Fabio Turchi. You know, it's a great shot by Richard Riakporhe. The issue with Richard Riakporhe, for my money, is that while he's a big puncher, while he's physically imposing, I actually don't think he imposes himself on opponents enough. Sometimes he's a little standoffish, looking for the perfect shot. He doesn't impose his physicality on his opponents, and he can certainly be outworked in my opinion. And of course, as we know, that is one thing Chris Billam Smith is. He's a workhorse. He is a tough guy who will take risks, and he's not afraid to get down and dirty. When I look at this fight, the longer it stays on the outside, the more I believe Richard Riakporhe has a chance to land that straight right hand and knock Chris Billam Smith out. However, if Chris Billam Smith can spend a great period of time on the inside, I think he can outwork and out-hustle Richard Riakporhe. For me, Billam Smith has to be all the way in this fight. I don't think he can maybe nick rounds in a boxing match, but, you know, due to Riakporhe's low output style, but I can see Riakporhe landing that perfect shot and hurting Chris Billam Smith and potentially knocking him out. It's interesting because in the Gloves Are Off, they did a sit down, and Riakporhe was under the impression that Billam Smith was deteriorating. And I can kind of see why he's been hurt a couple of times recently against an unknown cruiserweight in Zherzhai, an Albanian cruiserweight. He was buzzed up by Okole on one occasion, I believe. And also Masternak hurt Chris Billam Smith. So you look at his last 3 fights, he has been hurt. Whereas prior, he always showed a really good chin. And don't get me wrong, he wasn't like dropped in any of these fights, recent fights, but you could see that he felt those shots. And I think Richard Riakporhe is certainly a bigger puncher than Matthias Masternak. I think he's certainly a bigger puncher than Armand Zherzhai. Maybe on a similar level to Okole, but I think he's going to be more up for it than Lawrence Okole. I think Okole was kind of struggling with the weight. We saw in his last fight at Bridgerweight, he came in at the mid-220s. So yeah, I think Riakporhe is going to be a lot fresher than Okole. And much like Okole, I say that Chris Billam Smith should spend a lot of time on the inside. Much like Okole, not as bad, but Riakporhe can hold, he can wrestle, he can make it ugly. I can see either guy winning this fight, but when I look at it, sometimes you have to go with gut instinct. You know, you can break a fight down all you want, but sometimes gut instinct rules the day for me personally. And my gut instinct tells me Richard Riakporhe wins this fight. You know, it's in his hometown. It's at his home football club stadium, Crystal Palace, Selhurst Park. I think Sky Sports want Richard Riakporhe to win. I think they view him as more marketable. And I think he is the fresher fighter out of the two. Possibly more hungry as well, you know? Chris has become a world champion, something he wasn't expected to do. You go back and look at these guys on the come-up. Riakporhe was certainly more highly regarded, I would say. And I think maybe Chris Billam Smith has seen his... has reached his ceiling at world level. And I think that this could be set up for Riakporhe to win, personally. I'm going to go Riakporhe by knockout. Second half of this fight, Riakporhe by knockout. I'm going by gut instinct on this fight. I'm going by gut instinct. But yeah, interesting fight. It's good that it's a domestic world title fight at cruiserweight. I'm expecting a good fight. I'm hoping it's a good fight. Good atmosphere, good crowd, etc. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But my gut instinct tells me Riakporhe wins by knockout. Second half of this fight. Anyway, share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Del Boy. Peace.